our first Hydro Claymore! Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Is Aino even usable as a free 4-star character? Well, the truth is more complicated than it might seem. In today's video, we'll take a look at just how useful, or not, a Constellation 0 Aino can be for your account. Aino is in a pretty weird spot actually as of her release, because she's not going to be a featured character on the first banner. Instead, she's going to be a featured character on Flins' banner in the second half. So for now, everyone can actually only get her at Constellation 0, I believe. So I know what you're thinking about Aino. She's probably not very good as a fully free-to-play Constellation 0 character. However, I was actually pleasantly surprised by what she's capable of. For example, for one, she's actually pretty strong. If you actually notice that, she flings the Claymore herself with Basic 1 and Basic 2. And compared to her peer, for example, Dory, who doesn't bother swinging it herself, Aino actually does swing it for 2 slashes before the 3rd slash, where her lizard-like tail frog tongue thing yeets it at the enemy. So kudos to her for actually swinging the Claymore herself for parts of her basic attack. Now let's actually go ahead and swap over to a weapon that better matches her aesthetics as the little mechanic that she is. We've got this craftable one right here, and Aino's idle animations are absolutely adorable. You can see here she has an eternal battle with her sock, which always seems to win out in the end. I know way she can't afford a new sock with all her fancy gadgets. And next thing is, what do these 4 characters have in common with Aino? I'll give you guys 1 second to guess. Time's up. Well, they are all able to ka-ching around. We have the original ka-ching, the electro ka-ching. Then we have the dendro ka-ching, Alhaitham. And then we have animo ka-ching, Lanyan. And of course we have Geo ka-ching with Chiori. And you might be thinking, I know way that they finally added a Hydro Claymore character. Well, Aino is also our first Hydro ka-ching in the game, and I am so proud of her for what she's managed to accomplish in such a short amount of time. But all that fluff is probably not why you clicked on this video. You clicked on it to see how good she is in combat. Aino does have the Fantastical Blessing active, which I know what you're thinking, it doesn't make much of a difference for Aino. Starting off with her starting build, she's using the Favonius Greatsword, and she's using the new artifact set, the Silken Moon's Serenade. For now, she's at Constellation 0, and finally, her talents are at 9, 9, and 9. And if you're as hyped as I am for... then there's a newish hype button on YouTube. Just hit that like button down below, and then there's a hype button that sometimes appears, and you can smash that to show how hyped you are for Nod Cry as well. This video was filmed on the early access server and is not indicative of the final product. There may be some changes on release, so be sure to check the comments down below to see if there are any. And here's an exclusive 60 Primogems code for you all because you liked and subscribed. Just check the description for a link to it and or the code itself. For tradition's sake, let's start off with her basic attacks, Bish Bash Bosh Repair. These do about as much damage as they look. Unfortunately, Bish Bash Bosh Repair doesn't repair the enemy as you might expect based on its name. And yes, I tested it out against robots. Cute, but negligible damage. Next up is her elemental skill, Muse Catcher. Aino whips out her lizard tail contraption and yeets herself towards the target. What makes it mildly interesting is that it actually consists of 2 hits, with the first hit applying Hydro and the second hit not applying Hydro. Because the first hit is such a puny multiplier, this means that it's frankly not even worth vaping, because the first hit's multiplier is smaller than Xiao in comparison to the second hit. While this might seem like purely a downside, fortunately the double tap actually does double her chances of activating the Favonius. But yeah, I know one gonna be using her for her forward vape damage. And before we talk about her elemental burst, we'll very briefly have to talk about Moon Sign as well, another new Nod Cry mechanic. And don't worry, I'm working on another video to better explain this. Basically, as of 6.0's release, there are 3 characters with a passive that provides 1 Moon Sign level. These characters, being from Nod Cry, are Lauma, Aino, and Ineffa. So with one of these characters in your party or 1 Moon Sign level, you get Nascent Gleam. And with 2 Moon Sign characters in your party, you get Ascendant Gleam, and Nascent Gleam is still active as well. Various artifacts, weapons, and characters have effects based on whether or not you have Nascent and or Ascendant Gleam. Finally, non-Moon Sign characters also provide a buff to lunar reactions if you have Ascendant Gleam, which again I'll go over in much more detail in a full guide on this. And with that info dump, we can talk about her elemental burst, Precision Hydronic Cooler. For this first version, where you have Nascent Gleam or lower, Aino summons Ducky, and Ducky will attack once every 1.5 seconds for 9 hits total, and every other hit applies Hydro. So with Aino as the only Nod Cry Moon Sign character on your party, Ducky only applies Hydro once every 3 seconds, and applies Hydro a total of 5 times. However, what if we go further beyond with another Nod Cry Moon Sign character on the team and thus Ascendant Gleam? With Ascendant Gleam, Ducky now attacks every 0.7 seconds and applies Hydro every 3 hits or every 2.1 seconds. This is of course a significant improvement, applying Hydro 7 times total with more AoE on each hit as well. Although the targeting does appear to be a bit wonky at times with one of the hits whiffing against the Regisvine, this is definitely a major improvement for Aino's elemental burst. Oh right, and Ducky technically does damage, and it scales off of Aino's attack stat and elemental mastery stat, but just look for yourself, a very quackluster amount of damage. Let's put Aino's full kit to the test. A valiant attempt and technically non-negligible damage, but let's move on. Regardless of how useful she might be for your specific account in terms of combat, I know she'll have some value since her passive detects local Nod Cry resources. Now let's take her buffing Ineffa's lunar charge damage as an example.
Not bad.
While not fully reflective of how Aino will perform with Flins, since well this is Ineffa, this gives us a sneak peek of how she can benefit lunar charged characters. This free-to-play friendly Ineffa is using the craftable Prospector Shovel polearm, and thanks to obtaining Ascendant Gleam, now the polearm provides an additional 24% lunar charge damage. Ascendant Gleam also provides another 60 elemental mastery thanks to the Silken Moon's Serenade artifact set, and since Ineffa is using the Night of the Skies Unveiling to simulate her being an on-field lunar charge DPS character, Ineffa gains 15% additional crit rate thanks to Ascendant Gleam. Then, Moon Sign's Ascendant Gleam bonus is providing some more lunar charge damage. So yeah, just by Aino existing on the team and providing 1 level to Moon Sign, Ineffa gains around a 30% increase to her passive one's lunar charged damage. Oh right, and the lunar charged reaction itself is doing a lot more damage with Aino on the team, and this team's rotation is shortened, and Aino is much less dorky than Xingqiu. Now, what about Aino buffing Lauma Bloom teams? I decided to do quite a few anecdotal tests. Just by substituting, for example, Nahida with a Constellation 0 Aino, I found that these teams ended up having very similar results. And this is because Ascendant Gleam is just a very powerful team buff because it gives 60 elemental mastery to the entire team through the Silken Moon's Serenade going from Nascent to Ascendant Gleam. And because we have Nilo on this team for this specific Nilo Bloom test, she's using the Serenity's Call, which also increases her max HP by an additional 32% thanks to Ascendant Gleam. Not only that, but for these setups, I actually found utilizing, for example, the Night of the Skies Unveiling on Lauma herself to actually be quite effective. And that means another 15% crit rate for Lauma as well. And on top of that, we even get the Moon Sign bonus for non-Nodcry characters to boost Lunar Bloom damage. So factoring in all of this, we can actually see that even for a Nilo Bloom team, by replacing Nahida here with Aino and on-fielding Lauma, we're getting some very, very similar performance, which honestly kind of shocked me. And I even had very similar anecdotal test results for a Hyper Bloom team as well, where both of the teams basically performed very, very similarly to each other. And I did make one little mistake. All these tests I did with Lauma's signature weapon, but I don't think that makes like a huge difference all things considered, but it does make a bit of a difference, so do keep that in mind. But yeah, anecdotal tests are showing that Aino is actually a pretty decent substitute, even though you lose that 15% crit rate on the blooms. All the buffs thanks to Ascendant Gleam seem to be pulling the weight there and making up for that. As we can see, Aino is a pretty decent character for lunar reactions, and by simply existing and putting her onto the team, she provides one moon sign level, and this moon sign level gives you 60 or 120 elemental mastery by enabling the Silken Moon Serenade set. And if the on-field DPS character is using the Night of Skies Unveiling, this can give them 15% or 30% crit rate, and having Ascendant Gleam allows non-moon sign characters to also buff lunar reactions. Aino's actual kit provides, with Nascent Gleam, her elemental burst applies Hydro once every 3 seconds. With Ascendant Gleam, her burst applies Hydro once every 2.1 seconds. Her Constellation 1 provides 80 elemental mastery to the on-field character. Her Constellation 2 provides 3 more Hydro applications or so during her burst. And her Constellation 6 provides 10% or 35% lunar reaction damage. Not only that, but because she can equip Claymores, she can use the Makhaira Aquamarine, the Forest Regalia on Bloom teams, and even the Wolf's Gravestone. Alright, we've got quite a few Aino showcases, so let's get through them. For this first one, we are LARPing Ineffa as a main DPS lunar charged character. Of course, you know, in this case, she's kind of playing the role of Flins, and yeah, I have a feeling that Aino is going to be quite good with Flins, all things considered, because Aino just happens to tick all the right boxes in terms of the amount of Hydra she applies, as well as the buffs that she provides to the team, thanks to her being, well, you know, a Nodcry Moonsign character, for a character like a main DPS lunar charged character. Now up next we have Lauma, and for Lauma team specifically, I would say that Aino is more of a side grade, because yeah, you are losing that 15% crit rate and 100% crit damage to regular bloom damage, but you are of course boosting Lauma's lunar bloom damage instead. And in this case, I actually have Lauma on the night set because of that, and on-fielding her so that way she can, you know, apply enough Dendro to keep up with 2 Hydro characters, which is pretty nice. And that's the thing about Aino, is that because she is a free off-field Hydro applier, Xingqiu now finally can catch a bit of a break, like in this Lauma as well as Aino team for Alhaitham. And this is a really cool team because it enables a lot of new builds for these characters. Like for example, for Alhaitham, you can use that new night set to get a lot more crit rate, which is fantastic. Up next, we have an Arlecchino team, and what's really cool about pairing Aino plus another moon sign character on any team is that now they've enabled that artifact set, the Knight of whatever artifact set, for literally any DPS character that they are paired with. Arlecchino can use it, although I don't think I was using it in this case. But another really neat thing about Aino is she has shortened down the rotation here. This enemy died here, obviously, you know, to 1 rotation really. But you can see there that we could easily extend it thanks to Aino's shorter cooldowns. And in a similar vein, we can also run a double Hydro plus Pyro DPS character, and in this case, because, you know, I want to use Aino with a second moon sign character. Of course, Ineffa happens to be the best option for that for very obvious reasons. That way Aino can provide the maximum buffs, but this team felt pretty good. You're able to obviously maintain Hydro uptime, not a problem, and improve Hu Tao's damage significantly. And up next, we actually have Alhaitham, and this is one of, I would say, Aino's better teams without a second a moon sign character, because one issue with Aino is that without the second moon sign character, Nascent Gleam is nowhere near as potent as Ascendant Gleam when it comes to providing buffs for the team. And finally, we do have a Taser team that I tried with Nascent Gleam only, and personally I didn't really like this team much. It didn't really do much damage. But, you know, you can't really have Aino as the only Hydro applier in this situation, because she just does not apply enough Hydro for Taser on her own. So then you're stuck using like Yelan or Xingqiu or something, and you can't run, for example, Fischl. There's a lot of problems with this, or you can't run Auroron if you're using Fischl instead. Yeah, yada yada yada. But yeah, as the only moon sign character, she does feel a bit lacking for most of these teams. So yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised by Aino's performance. Not only is she both free and cute, Aino is clearly a great free-to-play friendly option for lunar-based teams. And personally, I expect her to be quite good with Flins, especially if you don't have Ineffa, because, well, Aino exists and she'll provide one moon sign level. Aino should also be a good free-to-play friendly option for a future Lunar Bloom DPS character if you do not get Lauma to, well, provide that +1 moon sign level. Constellation 0 Aino is also a solid side grade for Lauma teams, which I was quite surprised by, even performing about as good as Nahida in those teams. And Aino provides decent Hydro application with Ascendant Gleam and her Constellation 2. Aino also shortens rotations with her 13.5 second burst, especially compared to a character like Xingqiu. For example, Ineffa plus Arlecchino plus Aino definitely benefits from this shorter rotation, and she even has some decent support Claymore options. And also, her Constellation 1 and Constellation 2 are both pretty good, and they're early constellations. And finally, her Constellation 6 is good as well. Now, what are Aino's cons? Well, let's be real, she doesn't actually do that much with her kit, besides apply +1 moon sign level and apply a bit of Hydro, especially at Constellation 0. And I suspect that Aino is going to be one of the first characters to be power crept by a 5-star alternative in Nod Cry. So yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised by Aino's performance here. I expected her to, well, just not really do much, but by just existing, she actually does quite a bit. Now, Aino's biggest issue, in my opinion, is that she's not very good without other moon sign characters at the moment. Nascent Gleam alone doesn't do much, as most things are dependent on Ascendant Gleam, so you need 2 characters. And she might be a bit more serviceable at Constellation 2 as the only moon sign character, but again, none of us are going to get her constellations, at least I'm pretty sure, until we get Flins. Now, she also doesn't enable either Lunar Charge or Lunar Bloom by herself, so her lunar related buffs like her Constellation 6 aren't useful without Ineffa, Flins, or Lauma, or any other future lunar reaction based character. Still, overall, I was actually pleasantly surprised by her performance, at the very least right now, for Ineffa and Lauma, and I personally expect her performance to be even better with the upcoming character, Flins. So yeah, if you plan to participate in any of Nod Cry's lunar reaction mechanics, I suspect Aino will be a very solid, free-to-play friendly option for you and your account. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Win to Lose, signing out.